I never expected that signing up for a month-long fitness boot camp would turn into this kind of experience. Like, I thought I'd get a few grueling workouts, some sweat, maybe even some new gym buddies. What I didn't expect was to spend nearly every session with this guy, Jake, the guy who was supposed to be my trainer, but who somehow kept finding reasons to touch my arm. Not in a creepy way, at least not overtly. It was always subtle, like a tap here, a guiding hand there, but enough to make me question if I was just imagining things or if there was something definitely more going on. So yeah, here's the deal. I'm 27, not exactly a fitness junkie, but I figured it was time to get serious about my health. I signed up for this boot camp at the local gym because the reviews said the trainers were great, and the sessions were intense but friendly. On my first day, I met Jake. He's about 30, with those dark, curly hair and this easy smile that honestly made me a little nervous. Not because he was intimidating, but because he seemed genuinely interested in making sure I didn't quit after the first session. And trust me, I was that guy who wanted to quit the second I felt my lungs burning. Jake was introduced as the lead trainer for the group, which was a small class of about 10. I was expecting the usual. Barked orders, lots of yelling, maybe a bit of tough love motivation. Instead, Jake was patient and really hands-on. That's when it started, the touches on my arm. At first, it was just to correct my form or to point at a muscle subtly when demonstrating exercises. But soon, it felt like every time he came near, our skin brushed or he'd rest a hand on my forearm just a little longer than necessary. I'll admit, I'm not exactly smooth with my own feelings, so I wasn't sure if I was just noticing these touches because I was shy or because there might be a spark there. I didn't want to assume anything, especially considering this was a professional setting. But the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention, it wasn't just trainer to client. There was something else, something curious, maybe even a little flirty. This whole thing got even weirder during the second week. We'd been paired up for partner exercises. Nothing too crazy, just stuff like medicine ball passes or partner planks. But Jake kept finding excuses to stand close behind me, his hand on my arm helping me stabilize, or his voice low in my ear giving extra instructions. Every time, my heart would skip a beat, and I'd try not to stare at the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. One day after class, I stayed back to ask him about some nutrition tips, and he didn't leave right away. Instead, he leaned against the wall just a bit too casually, and I caught him watching me with this look that made me want to either run or lean in. It was confusing as hell, but also kind of exciting. I'm not sure exactly what I was hoping for when I signed up for this boot camp, but I didn't expect to get training in more ways than one. Now I'm stuck wondering if Jake's touches are just part of the job, or if they're trying to tell me something I haven't quite figured out yet. And honestly, I can't wait to find out. After that day, I started showing up a little early for class, just to have an excuse to talk to Jake before anyone else arrived. It was dumb, I know. Like, the whole point was to get in shape, not to hang out with my trainer like we were old friends. But honestly, the more I thought about those moments when his hand lingered on my arm, the more I wanted to see what was behind those glances. One Wednesday morning, I got to the gym 15 minutes early and found Jake already setting up the cones and kettlebells. He looked up when I walked in and gave me that same easy smile, the one that made me forget to breathe for a second. "Morning, man," he said, wiping his hands on a towel. "You're early." "Yeah, trying to actually be on time for once," I joked, feeling awkward but hoping he'd keep the conversation going. He chuckled and nodded. "Good plan. You ready for today? We're focusing on endurance." I glanced around the nearly empty gym, feeling like my heart was pounding louder in the quiet space than it did during the actual workouts. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, trying to sound casual. Jake walked over like he was about to give me a pep talk, and without thinking, I noticed his hand brush against my arm. Light, but definitely intentional. He didn't pull away quickly, like most people would. Instead, it stayed there for a moment, almost like he was grounding himself or maybe trying to send some kind of signal. Before I could overthink it, he said, "Let's start with some warm-ups. I'll show you the moves first." As he demonstrated, I watched the way his muscles flexed under the gym lights, how focused he looked. but it was the way he moved close enough to correct my form that had me feeling things. When he adjusted my elbow during a plank, his fingers just barely grazed my skin, and I swear my stomach flipped. After the warm-up, we moved on to the circuits. Every time I struggled with a set, Jake was right there, offering tips and encouragement. At one point, I dropped a weight from exhaustion, and before I could even apologize, he was crouching beside me, his hand on my arm again. "Hey, don't sweat it. You're killing it," he said, voice low. There was something in the way he said that, like he actually believed it, but also like he was trying to tell me something more. I looked up at him, and for a moment, his eyes held mine a little longer than usual. The gym noise faded, and all I could hear was the thump of my heart. "Thanks," I managed to say, voice a little hoarse. The rest of the session flew by, but the tension between us didn't loosen. After class, as everyone gathered their stuff, Jake approached me with a grin. "You're improving faster than I expected." "Yeah, maybe your training methods are better than I thought," I replied, trying to sound confident, though inside I was anything but. He tooled his head, a playful smirk spreading across his face. "Maybe, or maybe you're just motivated by the wrong reasons." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Jake shrugged, then looked away for a second, like he wasn't sure if he'd said too much. "You know, sometimes touches say more than words." That hit me like a rock. I laughed nervously, not sure how to respond, but before I could say anything else, the gym door opened and another trainer called Jake over. "Duty calls," Jake said, giving me one last look that made my knees feel weak. That night, I lay in bed replaying every moment from the day, the touches, the looks, the half-words. I kept wondering if I was reading too much into things, or if Jake was just being a good trainer with a naturally friendly touch. But deep down, I hoped it was more. The next few days, I found myself paying more attention during our sessions. I caught how Jake's hand seemed to brush my arm whenever he was particularly focused on me, how he'd lean in closer than necessary to explain something, or laugh quietly at a joke I barely made. I started texting him between classes, mostly about workout tips or meal plans, but sometimes the messages drifted toward casual small talk. One afternoon, after a brutal leg day, Jake offered to walk me out to my car. It was the kind of gesture that could mean nothing, or it could mean everything, depending on how you looked at it. We walked in silence for a bit, the air cool and crisp outside the gym. Then Jake stopped and looked over at me. "You know, you don't have to be nervous around me," he said softly. I frowned. "Nervous? Why would I be nervous?" He shrugged, but there was an honest warmth in his voice. "I don't know. You just seem tense sometimes, like you're holding something back." I hesitated, feeling a mix of embarrassment and something else. Hope, maybe? "I guess I'm not used to getting this kind of attention," I admitted. Jake smiled, and his eyes sparkled in the fading light. "Well, if it makes you feel any better, I'm pretty sure I'm just as nervous as you are." I blinked, caught off guard by how real that sounded. "Wait, really?" He nodded. "Yeah, training clients isn't usually this complicated." At that moment, the space between us felt charged, like something was about to happen, but neither of us was quite ready to cross the line. I wanted to reach out, to close that gap, but my voice caught in my throat. Instead, Jake took a step closer and lightly touched my arm again. This time, firmer, more intentional. "If you want, maybe we could grab a coffee sometime, outside the gym." My heart hammered so loud I was sure he could hear it. "I'd like that," I said before I could overthink it. He grinned, that same easy smile that had pulled me in from day one. "Cool, I'll text you." As he walked away, I stood there for a moment, wondering how the hell a simple fitness boot camp had turned into this unexpected, confusing, exciting mess. But one thing was clear. This was just the beginning, and I was more than ready to see where it would go. We ended up texting later that night, and honestly, I couldn't stop smiling while scrolling through our messages. It started off as workout advice, like what to eat before a session, and then it slowly drifted into more personal stuff. He told me about how he got into training, how he used to play soccer until an injury sidelined him, and how he loved pushing people because he knew what it felt like to feel stuck. I shared a bit about my own struggles with staying consistent and how gym anxiety had kept me away for years. It felt weirdly easy, like talking to someone who saw me, really saw me, without judging or expecting anything. But I kept reminding myself to not get ahead of things. Jake was my trainer after all. But then again, the way he kept touching my arm during sessions, I figured maybe he felt something too. Our coffee date happened a few days later, after class. We met at this small, quiet cafe a couple blocks from the gym. Jake showed up wearing a hoodie and jeans, his hair a little messier than usual, and smiled that same warm smile that made my stomach do flips. "Hey," he said, sliding onto the bench across from me. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, a bit breathless from nerves. We ordered our drinks and settled into this cozy corner spot. At first, the conversation was easy and light. Workouts, favorite music, random stories from childhood. But as the cafe filled with the afternoon crowd, the noise seemed to push us closer, like we were in our own little bubble. At one point, Jake reached across the table and brushed my hand. It was so casual I almost thought it was accidental, but when I looked at him, he bit his lip and didn't pull away. "Do you think this is weird?" he asked quietly. I shook my head, feeling heat rush to my cheeks. "No, not at all." He smiled, and it was more than just a smile. It was a look of relief, like he'd been holding something back and finally let it out. "I've been wanting to do that for a while," he admitted. That simple confession made everything suddenly real. I realized I'd been waiting for him to make the first move, to break the ice, and here he was, right in front of me. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. The awkward tension melted into something warm, like the feeling you get when you finally find someone who gets you. I could tell Jake was nervous too, but there was this honesty between us that I hadn't felt in a long time. When it was time to leave, we walked out into the cool evening air. The streetlights cast a soft glow as we stood outside the cafe, neither of us wanting the night to end. Jake cleared his throat. "So, would you want to come over sometime? I mean, for dinner or whatever. I'm a decent cook, promise." I laughed. "I'm in, just don't burn down the kitchen." He grinned. Deal. The next few days were filled with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. At the gym, things felt different. The touches on my arm were no longer just professional guidance. They felt charged, like secret messages only we could understand. I caught him stealing looks when he thought I wasn't paying attention, and I found myself doing the same. Our training sessions became this strange dance of getting fitter while figuring out what the hell was happening between us. One afternoon, during a stretches cool down, Jake pulled me aside. "Hey," he said softly, "I know this might be weird, but I don't want to keep hiding how I feel." I looked at him, heart pounding. "Me neither." Then, with a shy smile, he leaned in and kissed me. It was gentle and slow, the kind of kiss that makes everything else fade away. When we pulled apart, I felt like I was floating. From that moment, things moved fast but felt right. We started hanging out more outside the gym. Late night dinners, movie marathons, long talks about hopes and fears. Jake was more than just my trainer or a crush. He became my closest friend, my partner in crime. Of course, there were moments of awkwardness, like when I accidentally called him coach during a date, or when we had to remind ourselves that the gym was still a place of work. But we navigated it together, figuring out how to balance training and dating without letting either complicate the other. One day, a few weeks into our unofficial relationship, Jake surprised me by planning a hike. We spent the whole afternoon climbing hills, laughing at our out-of-breath selves, and sharing stories with the kind of openness that only comes when you're comfortable being exactly who you are. At the summit, looking out over the city lights, Jake took my hand and said, "I'm really glad I kept touching your arm." I laughed, squeezing his hand. "Me too." Looking back, I never expected that signing up for a boot camp would lead me here, finding someone who made the hard work worth it, someone who made me believe in something more than just reps and sets. And honestly, I can't wait to see where this goes next. After that hike, things between us felt like they finally had some kind of solid footing, not just physically, but emotionally too. I mean, training with Jake was one thing, but sharing these quiet moments made me realize how much I'd been craving connection, not just a workout buddy. One Saturday morning, Jake invited me over to his place for breakfast. I was a little nervous. First meals at someone's house always are. But when I got there, he greeted me with that same easy smile. and the smell of fresh coffee and something sizzling on the stove eased my nerves right away. His apartment was cozy, with workout gear neatly stacked in one corner, and a shelf filled with books ranging from fitness guides to travel memoirs. Jake was flipping pancakes, and I watched him move around the kitchen like he'd done it 1,000 times. "You're here early," he said, looking over his shoulder. "Couldn't wait," I admitted, smiling. He laughed and handed me a cup of coffee. "Good answer." We ate on the small dining table, and between bites, we talked about everything. Our families, what brought us to this city, the awkward moments in our lives we never shared with anyone else. I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't with anyone for years. After breakfast, Jake suggested we try a new workout routine together. I was hesitant at first, knowing I'd be pushing myself harder than usual, but with him by my side, it felt doable. We started with some light cardio, and then moved on to resistance training. At one point, I struggled with a move, and Jake came over to help. His hand rested on my arm, not just to correct my form this time, but as if to steady me, to keep me grounded. "Easy there," he said softly, eyes locked on mine. "You're doing great." I swallowed hard, not sure if it was the workout or just how close we were standing, maybe both. Later, as we cooled down stretching, Jake rested his hand on my shoulder, and that familiar warmth spread through me. "Hey," I said, breaking the comfortable silence. "I've been meaning to ask, how do you manage to balance this whole trainer-client thing with everything else? I mean, us." He smiled, but there was a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "Honestly, it's not easy. I've had to keep my feelings in check before. Professional boundaries, you know? But with you, it's different. Feels natural." I nodded, understanding the tightrope he was walking. "I feel the same. It's like we're figuring this out as we go." He reached out, squeezing my hand gently. "Yeah. And I want to take this slow. No rush." I appreciated that. I wasn't looking for fireworks or drama. I wanted something real, something steady. That afternoon, after I left, I felt a strange mix of excitement and calm. For once, I wasn't dreading the next training session. I was looking forward to it. A few days later, during class, Jake paired me up with someone else for a partner exercise. It threw me off more than I expected. I realized just how much I'd grown used to his presence, his touch. Afterward, Jake pulled me aside. "You okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just wasn't expecting the switch." He nodded. "I get it. But it's good to mix things up. Keeps you on your toes." The honesty between us was comforting, even when things felt a little awkward. As the weeks passed, our relationship deepened. We started meeting outside of workouts more often, sometimes for coffee, sometimes just to hang out and watch movies. Jake introduced me to his circle of friends, and I realized how easy it was to fit in with them. They teased him mercilessly about his trainer crush, but Jake just shrugged it off with a grin. One night, after a late dinner at his place, we found ourselves lingering on the couch, the room dimly lit by a single lamp. Jake looked at me, his expression soft. "I don't want to mess this up," he said quietly. "You mean a lot to me." I reached out, tracing circles on his hand. "You don't have to worry. I feel the same." There was a pause. Then he leaned in, and our lips met in a kiss that was tender and full of promise. That night, as I walked home, I thought about how strange and unexpected this journey had been. From a boot camp where I just wanted to get in shape, to finding someone who made me feel seen and valued. And yeah, there were still uncertainties ahead. Navigating the shift from trainer and client to something more wasn't always simple, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to take the leap. With Jake by my side, it didn't feel scary. It felt like the start of something real. After that night, things settled into this comfortable rhythm between us. Workouts, hanging out, little stolen moments that made me feel like I was living in one of those honestly good rom-coms, minus the cheesy soundtrack. But as easy as it was, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't wrestling with a bunch of questions in my head. Like, where exactly were we heading? Was this just a fun thing for Jake, or did he actually see me as more than just a client-turned-crush? And Hell, what did I even want? One afternoon, about a month into this, we had a session scheduled at the gym. I was feeling a little off. Nervous, actually. And it wasn't just because of the usual workout jitters. Jake showed up looking his usual confident self, but when he saw me, his smile softened. "You all right?" he asked as we started warming up. I shrugged, trying to brush it off. "Yeah, just stuff on my mind." He nodded like he understood, which made me want to spill everything but also keep it all to myself. Halfway through, as we moved into some partner resistance drills, Jake was helping me with form, his hands steady on my arms. That familiar touch sent a jolt through me, but this time I decided to say what was swirling inside. "Jake," I said, catching his attention, "can I ask you something?" He raised an eyebrow, a small grin tugging at his lips. "Shoot." I took a breath, trying to keep it casual. "Where do you see this going?" I mean us, not just the training part. For a second he froze, like I'd caught him off guard. Then he smiled, that slow, honest smile that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. "I've thought about that a lot," he said quietly. "And honestly, I don't want to just be the guy who trains you. I want more. But I also don't want to rush or mess things up." I nodded, relief and excitement mixing in my chest. "Yeah, me too." We finished our workout with a little more ease, but the tension between us shifted into something warmer, something promising. Later that evening, Jake texted me. Simple, just, "Coffee tomorrow? I want to talk more." I almost didn't sleep that night, thinking about what more could mean. The next day, we met at that same quiet cafe. This time, the conversation dug deeper. He told me about his last relationship, how he'd held back because of work boundaries, and how that had messed things up. I shared my own fears about being vulnerable, about opening up and risking getting hurt. "I don't want to make the same mistakes," Jake said, "but I also don't want to miss out on something real." That hit me hard. There was a kind of bravery in admitting that, and it made me feel like I could be brave too. Our talks became a regular thing. No more just training advice or casual chats. We started planning little things together, like weekend hikes or cooking dinners. Jake even convinced me to sign up for a 5K race, a big deal for a guy who used to hate running. One Sunday morning, after a particularly tough long run, Jake surprised me with breakfast at his place again. We sat at the kitchen counter, both exhausted and sweaty, laughing over burnt toast and overcooked eggs. "You know," he said, wiping his brow, "I'm proud of you." I looked at him, heart swelling. "Thanks. Couldn't have done it without you." He reached out, fingers brushing my arm like he'd done so many times before. But now it felt different, less like a trainer correcting a client, more like a person connecting with someone he cared about. "I mean it," he said softly. "You've come a long way, and I'm lucky to be part of it." That night, walking home, I felt a sense of calm that I hadn't known in years. It wasn't just about fitness anymore. It was about trust, about finding someone who believed in me, flaws and all. But of course, no story is without its bumps. A week later, during a training session, I caught Jake looking distracted. He was a little distant, his usual easygoing smile replaced by a thoughtful frown. After class, as we were packing up, I asked, "Everything okay?" He hesitated. "Yeah, just stuff with work. It's been stressful." I nodded, wanting to be supportive, but also feeling this little knot of worry. "Want to talk about it?" He shook his head. "Not right now, but thanks." Over the next few days, I noticed him pulling back a bit. Not completely, but enough that I wondered if something was going on. One evening, after a group workout, I caught him alone in the gym, stretching. I walked over and sat beside him. "Hey, you've been quiet. Want to tell me what's up?" Jake looked at me, vulnerability clear in his eyes. "I'm scared," he said. "Scared that if things get too serious, I'll mess it up, that I'll lose what we have." I surprised myself by reaching out and taking his hand. "We're figuring this out together. It's not perfect, but it's real." He squeezed my hand, a small smile breaking through. "Thanks. That means a lot." From that moment, I knew that whatever came next, we were in it together. And honestly, that was the best kind of training I could have asked for. The weeks that followed felt like that quiet, steady kind of progress. The kind that doesn't make headlines but means the world. Jake and I found a groove. balancing training sessions, dates, and the messy in-between moments where life just happened. No grand gestures, just small, honest ones that built something real. Like the way he'd send me a quick text during the day just to check in, or how I'd wait by the gym doors, knowing he'd be there to greet me with that easy smile. One evening, after a long day of work and training, we found ourselves sitting on his couch, feet tangled and playlists humming softly in the background. The city lights spilled through the windows, casting warm shadows around us. I caught Jake's eye and felt that familiar flutter in my chest. "You know," I said, "I never thought a boot camp would lead me here." He laughed, a low, genuine sound. Neither did I. We didn't need to say much after that. The comfort between us spoke volumes. The way his hand found mine, the quiet that wasn't empty but full of something good. In that moment, it was clear. This wasn't just a phase or a fling. It was real. I thought back to those first sessions when every touch on my arm had me wondering if it meant more. Now I knew it did. And it still does. Jake's touch became a language all its own, one that told me I was seen, valued, and wanted. As I leaned into that warmth, I realized how much I'd grown. Not just in strength or endurance, but in trust and vulnerability. With Jake, I was learning to let down walls I didn't even know I'd built. There's something powerful about finding someone who pushes you to be better, not by shouting or forcing change, but by simply being there. A partner in every sense. So yeah, the journey started with sweat and a lot of awkward moments, but it ended with something I didn't dare hope for, a connection that feels steady and true. And honestly, that's more than enough.